next week, and CLGR will be meeting here shortly in about 90 minutes to go over what we have and what we want the talking points to be. I would just say, to stick with that for just a moment. We don't need people to go in and be real technical with the legislators. Most of them that you'll be talking to, they may not even be on the committees where these bills are going to go through. So, a lot of it's just sort of a general, we're the engineers, we're here because we care, and we're watching. Um, and here's kind of in general where we stand on certain issues. Some people we may want to get more, a little more precise with them if they're on the right committees, or maybe carrying one of our bills or something like that. So, but we'll talk more about that at PE Days next week. So let me just get started, and I've got one new one on here, and I keep promising this, and I continue to promise that it will happen. That some of these bills are going to start leaving our list, like this first one we're about to talk about. And then we'll be adding on some more. There's a number that we're watching. They just haven't moved yet, so I haven't put them on the list, just uh, in the essence of time for this meeting. Um, but the first one we've got here is what I call the statute of repose bill. That's the main part of it. Takes the statute of repose from 10 to 7 years. Also provides a new date, which in most cases will be the temporary certificate of occupancy. There are a couple others that they call for in there, but it's whichever one comes earliest. So gets the clock running a little quicker. But as you can see, it is passed 2 of its committees in the House. It has 1 more to go. It has passed the full Senate now and is waiting for the House to take action. So as soon as the House gets it through that Judiciary Committee and gets it to the floor, they can take it up. The bills are a little bit different now, but I trust that when the House takes it into the Judiciary Committee, they're going to line it up with the Senate bill, so that once they go to the floor, they don't have to make a big deal out of it. They simply lay the House bill on the table, take up the Senate bill, pass it, and it's done, and it goes to the governor. So that one is poised to go, which we felt it would as the session started. Yeah, next we have the condo bill. And I hate to say it, but I had 3 or 4 things to do yesterday morning, and the Senate bill was up, and it's in the Fiscal Policy Committee. And I had looked at the amendments, and there wasn't anything startling there, so I didn't go to this meeting. And then I find out Senator Bradley actually quoted me during the meeting, so I have to go back and look at the video and see what she quoted. I've said a lot of things about condominiums over the last year and a half, and so we'll see. But anyway, the Senate bill now is waiting for the full Senate. Like I said, just passed out yesterday morning out of the Fiscal Policy Committee. They did have 11 amendments, or I'm sorry, 6 amendments. There's been 11 in total for that bill. None of them dealt with the inspection part of it or the parts that are important to us. It's mainly, the whole argument is over, again, the condo associations and how they pay for it, and they're getting into some of the insurance issues they're having and whatnot. So I think the Senate bill's in a really good place. The House bill's a little different. The House bill's got some stuff in there we don't like. It would allow general contractors and building departments to do the phase 1 inspections, which we don't feel is correct. But that's all a reaction to, not knowing for sure whether there's enough structural engineers to do this. The way the Senate handles that is the deadline remains the December 31st of 2024 for any building that's 30 years or older at that date. The Senate says that can be extended if there's a reason for it to be extended, and if you're under contract to have the building inspected, so that an association can go out, get themselves contracted, and even if that's not going to happen for a few months past the deadline, they can extend it. So I think that's a good way to do it, because that covers a couple of things. Number one, the associations a lot of times, or most of the time here right now, they're playing games with this. It's like, oh, we don't have enough structural engineers, and oh, we don't have enough reserves, and oh, we don't have this, and it's like they're trying to talk themselves or talk the legislature into repealing this requirement. And I don't think the legislature is going to do that, which is somewhat surprising to me. I thought they would try to soften up on the inspections a little bit this year, and we'd have to push back. But that really hasn't been the case. I think they realize the importance, and I keep feeding them information whenever I see a building, especially a condo in Florida that is evacuated. Um, and just to drive home the point that this problem is for real, and if you don't do something about it, you're going to have another one fall. And so I look for that one. I don't know exactly what the House is going to do. I know I heard Derek is on the line or on the call. Not sure about John. We're trying to get to Danny Perez, Representative Perez, to see, what his thoughts are on this. Because even though there's a different sponsor for this bill, Vicky Lopez, he's the one in the background that's controlling this issue in the House. So, Derek, I don't know, have we been able to chat with him yet?
We have not, Alan, and I haven't spoken to John this morning to find out what progress he's making, but I can do that.
Okay. Yeah, as you can see on here, it hasn't moved in the House. It was just filed a week or so ago, so not that's not surprising, but anyway, we kind of need to see where he's going. His issue all along has been not so much the inspections, it's the condos and funding the reserves and doing that sort of thing. So that's a lot of the stuff they're working on. So hopefully they can come to an agreement there. And we can get this moving. I just keep telling the most important thing to us is that we start getting these inspections scheduled and start getting them done. The buildings aren't getting any younger. So, all right, Laura, if we can move to the next one. And feel free, folks, to jump in and ask questions if you need to. Laura, we'll watch out for hands that go up. But we'll keep moving until we get that. The sovereign immunity bills. This one, I'll point out the first one, House Bill 401. In the second committee this week, it was temporarily postponed. And for those that don't know what that means, it can mean several things, but basically it means they put it on the agenda and then realized they didn't have the votes or they weren't ready to pass it, which is a big thing because this bill right here probably in our group impacts the CEIs more than anybody. Because they act as an agent for local and state government, and would get caught up in this. This would take the sovereign immunity deal right now is that if you sue a government, you get a judgment, you get $200,000, no matter what your judgment is, and for anything extra, you have to come to the legislature and get a bill passed to get the rest of your money or your judgment. This would increase that to $5 million, which is a big increase. And so there is a group of insurance lobbyists and others that have formed to oppose this bill. I know John sat in on their meeting last week, to kind of get the lay of the land from where they're coming from. So I think the insurance community is weighing in pretty heavy on this one. You can see it has not moved at all in the Senate, which is a good thing. I take some of these as good signs. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm correct. A lot of what we do up here is try to project what's happening based on things that we see like this. But I think a bill being TP'd right now, shows that there's some issues behind the scenes. And I know there is from John's talk with them. Derek, are you involved in that with John?
I'm not involved in this one.
Okay.
John solo on this one.
Okay, gotcha. All right, these next two. First of all, for all the water people that might be on this call, do not panic. This bill currently deals with another rule coming from DEP that needs to be ratified. It does not contain the rule that everybody's so concerned about, dealing with the wastewater. But these would be the bills if they're gonna ratify that rule. these would be the bills that it would go to. So I decided to put them on the list this week. There is a hearing next week on the 22nd for to go over this rule. We FES and ACEC, well, I guess there's more FES, but sent a letter to DEP with a lower cost alternative. So they're going to discuss that at the hearing next week. You know, I don't know how legit this meeting is. I have a feeling they're going to roll through and try to move forward with ratification. If that would happen, then somebody's going to challenge this law or challenge this rule. I really don't see a path for them to get this ratified this year, but stranger things have happened, so we need to make sure we dot all the I's and cross all the T's and go through the process. And part of that process next week will be this hearing. Excuse me, I'm fighting a little bit of a cough this week. So the good thing is we have a lot of our members that will be in town on the 22nd, because at the end of PE days, when everybody goes over to the Capitol and finishes that up, there's always a meeting with some of our members and officials from DEP, and that is still scheduled for that afternoon. The hearing will be at 10 o'clock that morning, so we can put some people. People can attend that meeting, if that's of interest to them. We will have Jeff Littlejohn's going to speak for our group. I'm not sure that I can get there. I would still have Jeff speak anyway if I was there. Jeff is a former deputy secretary at DEP. He knows their process, and he knows the technical parts of this too, being a PE himself. So he's the perfect person to get up there. And then we'll also have a couple of our members designated if there are any questions for that Jeff needs some help with. Those people would be there to, pardon me, those people would be there to speak as well. So I would just ask if anybody else goes to that, and I'll say this again next week, if you're not in that group that, to speak to support Jeff, and you want to speak, I mean, that's fine. It's a public hearing. Everybody's allowed to speak. Just make sure that you identify that you're speaking for yourself and not officially for FES or ACEC. We want to keep our message, straight and simple and whatnot. But I don't want to tell people not to talk. But if you want to testify, you certainly can. We just need to make sure that we're clear as to what our position is. And our position right now is we want to work with DEP. We want to get this solved. We think it's too fast to try to do it and get this ratification done, so we'd rather wait another year. On the other side of that, if they push to get this done, we're going to do what we need to do to get it stopped, because it's not ready to go and it's not ready to implement. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and that can change over the next week. So I'll update everybody next week at PE Days. I can't get this one quite off the list yet, but this is the university bill that it deals with the DEI programs and tenure and who hires professors and a whole bunch of issues. Where it's got us caught up is the accreditation. In the House bill that was in committee this week, House Bill 999. Representative Tant did raise the issue. She didn't mention engineers specifically, but she just said there are professions whose accreditation will be at stake if this law is passed, because many of the national boards or what have you require DEI programs for their accreditation. I think those groups are going to have to change what they're doing, because I think there's going to be a number of states that pass laws similar to this, but we seem to be the first one. And so she brought it up, and they kind of nodded and as to acknowledge it and moved right on. So it is what we thought it would be, that's not going to be enough of an argument to stop this bill, and therefore we're staying out of it. It's a much bigger issue. It's one of these culture war issues, and it just doesn't benefit us in any way to get sideways on one of these. if I had to guess on this one, it's going to pass. They're going to do something. It's going to be challenged. Somebody's going to sue, and it's going to, at least parts of it are going to be found unconstitutional. So, but that's not the game that's being played. The game that's being played is to get the red meat to the masses. So,
Hey,
but anyway,
Alan, if I can break in real quick,
sure.
the FEXCom was talking about how that might affect ABET
Right.
accredited schools, and some of them thought that it was going to, and some of them thought that it wasn't. But is there, as far as the ABET accreditation for, like, the technical schools, has there been any talk about anything? Because everybody was very concerned about that in the last FEXCom meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've had several meetings with folks, and it's been brought up at CLGR as well. Yeah, the ABET thing is a little strange because ABET hasn't actually passed the requirement yet. There was a motion made at their October meeting to include DEI programs in the criteria for accreditation, but it has not received final approval from them. And I think they're meeting this next week, if I'm not mistaken, and I was told it's not on their agenda. So it's possible maybe they're waiting. I know there's other professions, medical, legal, what have you, that have accreditations as well. And I think Representative Tant was kind of lumping them all into one. But I just have to say that the administration right now doesn't care. They'll just look at it and say, well, they need to change their accreditation criteria because we're moving forward with this. And I think, like I said, I think there's going to be some other states do that as well. So it's kind of setting all that up, but it makes it difficult for us, to go in there and talk about a rule that ABET has that isn't even final yet. So, the people over there would just say, well, then they don't need to do it. And the fact that they don't have it on their agenda next week, I think, I'm hoping maybe shows they're sort of holding up to see what Florida does and what some of these other states do, because if they wind up with 8 or 10 states that prohibit these programs, that's a problem for them. The other side of that is, yeah, I've heard talk, and they just got called out on it, that, well, the universities will just, they'll phrase it in a way, or they'll call it something else so that they can still get their accreditation, and it'll comply with whatever law is passed. And so DeSantis and others called them out on that the other day, and Tullett said, nope, that's not going to be allowed. So I mean, this is setting up to be a pretty good battle here. But I know the universities are working on it, and others, and I'm seeing some areas on some of these culture war issues from DeSantis where the legislature is starting to loosen those up a little bit and soften them a little bit. I don't know how far that will go here, if it will affect this bill at all, but it's they're taking some big swings at some big issues. There's no doubt.
And Alan, if I might, it's also my understanding that if a university does have an issue during an ABET reaccreditation, and remember, it's on a rotating 5-year basis, so some universities won't be affected by this for 5 more years to begin with. If they do have an issue with this particular one, they're not going to be unaccredited. They're just going to need to have it remedied by the time the next visit happens. So in theory, the first university could possibly lose accreditation as a result of this battle is more than 6 years out.
That's a good point, Peter. All right, anything else on that one? All right, the DOT bill, and I don't know if I've got Scott Perfader on here or not. He had sent me a question. What I do, you can just stay with that one, Laura. What I do is this language here where they're kind of explaining what's in the bill comes directly from the Senate's website. And I'll change that out. They change them if the bill changes. And, you can see there where it says CSCS for House Bill 425. That means it's been changed twice. And so that CS stands for committee substitute. So when I put these in there, it's coming, directly from the Senate's website. But this particular one doesn't really mention the part that we like that's in this bill, and that is Where there are savings found, as a project goes along, the engineer and the contractor can share in those savings. And I think it's set up as like 50% of the cost savings would stay with DOT, and then the other 50% would be divvied out, sort of a weighted average, if you will, of, the percentage of the contract that the engineer has and the contractor has. So there's a provision in there that it would allow for our side to just to share in those cost savings. The rest of it is not stuff that it's not stuff that we oppose, but it's not stuff that gets us to a point where we want to go and spend a lot of time trying to get it passed. But looks like it's moving well. It's gone through 2 out of 3 in the Senate, and Laura, if you scroll down just a little bit, yeah, 2 out of 3, or yeah, 2 out of 3 in the House as well. So it's just got one committee on each side, so it's positioned pretty well to get through. And this one is, for those that don't know, this is a bill that came back from last year. Last year they loaded this thing up at the end with a bunch of Miami-Dade Expressway Authority stuff, and that just killed it. It basically died right there. So I know they're trying to keep this one clean and get it out. There was the language about phase design build, or what was called progressive design build at the time, was in this bill when it started. That's been taken out. I've mentioned this a few times, been taken out and will be put into the budget package that comes from DOT. And then the fire sprinklers, it's awaiting action in the House by the full House, but we did talk with the sponsor of the bill last week to let her know that allowing contractors to do the design when they're expanding a fire sprinkler system is a no-no. If they're just moving the heads and it all remains pretty much the same, that's fine. But she didn't seem to know that the Senate sponsor had already said no to that. So I'm hoping we'll see, when that bill comes up before the House, that they'll be taking that part out. Otherwise, I don't think this bill is all that important to Senator Perry that he would go to the mat, for that issue. So we'll see how that goes.
Alan, quick question, please. And JW may have already addressed this, but we had a question in the chat about the House version mentioning some grading standards for AVs, but does not specifically indicate what those standards are. Do we know this information?
I don't.
Do you have any intel on that? Okay.
I don't. I'll look it up and report it next week. Or who's asking the question?
Carnot Evans.
Yeah, Carno Evans was asking
Sorry.
the question. I responded, Alan, that I'll investigate it and get back.
All right. Thank you, JW. I would just say, now JW spoke, what we're waiting on in the budget package that comes out of DOT and the larger, budget for the state, is the Moving Forward, Florida Forward program that Governor DeSantis had his press conference about a few weeks back. The funding that goes with that, the extra $7 billion, and everything else that was involved in that, in addition to the phase design build, and the other things, that's all going to be in that package. So we're waiting for that stuff to start moving, and our goal here is to make sure all that stuff stays in the bill, because that's a lot of money, and that's where the legislature can start to play a little bit. So we're watching for that closely.
Alan, if I may, I had lunch with Will Watts yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually one other component that's going to be in the implementation bill, and that is their second round of salary increases for their production staff. Obviously, that's of huge importance to them that remain in there, in addition to the Moving Florida Forward funding and the progressive or phase design bill. See, even I said it. The one key piece that Will wanted to emphasize was there's a $4 billion right now allocated in that budget for Moving Florida Forward. If that gets taken out, then FDOT would not be able to leverage that money and basically the whole program collapses because of the leveraging aspect. So it's really critical for moving Florida forward that the full 4 billion remain in place. So I don't know how we can spread that message, internally. They didn't necessarily want us to make a stand on it or let the trumpet go out, but everybody needs to be aware that if that 4 billion comes out, then the whole program collapses because of the leveraging of the remaining years.
No
Hey,
pressure.
JW, will the implementation bill will that be ready by the time we get up there Tuesday? Will we see that, or is that something that's going to come out later on in the session?
It'll be later. They're probably behind the scenes working on these things now, but the appropriations committee, the subcommittees will start and they'll start moving some things, and then it'll go to the full appropriations, and then they always wind up in conference committee, at the end on the budget. So I mean, there's several steps. I wouldn't say this is an easy lift to get this through. It's a lot of money, and they look for areas, and from what JW, last time I was with you and we talked to Will, it's like if any piece of that comes out, not just if the whole 4 billion comes out, it's, if half a billion comes out of that 4 billion, that messes everything up. Is that correct?
That's correct. It has to be the full 4 billion. I'm glad you expressed it that way, Alan. It's got to be the full 4 billion in order for the leveraging to work.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what, I'll work with Derek and John, and it might be Travis. We get involved in this, just figure out exactly where that is right now. If if they're beginning in, I know John's fully aware of it, and we're watching to make, listening, got our ears to the ground, so to speak, that, if there's any rumblings about any of that coming out. And so far I haven't heard anything, but we'll make it a point to check in on that, so we have a report for next week at PE Days.
Hey, Alan, this is Derek. So the House and Senate are actually planning on releasing their budget spreadsheets next week. So
Okay.
actually, while you all are in Tallahassee, we'll probably get our first look at what the House and Senate are proposing for their recommended budget. My understanding is there's been thorough and detailed conversation from the governor's office to the House and Senate about the program and the need to keep it whole. And so we'll get the first chance next week to just see what the House and Senate are proposing for the entirety of their respective budgets as relates to the governor's recommended budget. And so we'll have some detail while you all are here next week.
So we'll put DeSantis on our staff of lobbyists to keep this thing whole.
He's available.
Yeah, he'd be a good one to have. Expensive maybe, but
yeah.
But anyway, all right. Well, good. We'll follow up on that and see what we can find out prior to the meetings next week. And that's all I've got. It's 9 o'clock. If we got any more questions, we've got a few minutes built in here, or for those that may not know, the part on our environmental stuff will come up shortly. Jeff will go into, the rule from DEP in probably a little more detail, and his side of it is actually working with DEP. And so, he's got that perspective on it, where I'm kind of on the other side. I'm the guy and, throwing nails out in the road so they can't get this thing ratified. So unless we can agree on it, but otherwise, if there's no more questions, we'll call it a wrap, and we'll see you next week.
That's great. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
The environmental call is at 9:25 if you would like to join us. Go Knowles, Jose. Bye, guys.
We have a game tonight, so go Canes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Bye,
rubbing
guys.
it in that we don't.
Aw.